Hey everybody, this is Thaddeus again with Sprout City Studios here in Eugene, Oregon, coming back to you with another video. This time we're going to have a video series for you. We're going to do 3 videos on how to recognize when your ears are fooling you, because it's very easy for us to do things that fool the way that our ears recognize different frequencies, different loudnesses, and also how to just make sure that your ears don't get wrecked from too much volume. Part 1 of our series is on EQ, equalizers, the things that we use to adjust frequencies to make things fit together in a mix or make something really stand out. It's really easy with different kinds of EQ plugins nowadays to get fooled by what you're seeing on the screen versus what your ears are thinking they're hearing. So let's dive in and figure out how to work around some of the innate problems of visual EQing versus hearing EQ. So, with our first video in the series about how not to fool yourself, let's talk a little bit about EQ, how easy it is to think something sounds better just because you've EQ'd it brighter or deeper or something, because it's one of the first mistakes that all of us make. So let's dive in. This is a song by a local band called Flow Resale. This is called Starstruck, and it's really a nice composition. It was recorded here in the studio, and let's just dive in for a second just so you can hear what it sounds like before we do anything. This is somewhere in the middle of the song-ish. Okay, so you get the feeling for what they're doing. You can see that we've got it set up here that all of the tracks have been put into collapsible folders so that I can save some screen space for plugins and such. I figured would be the easiest for everybody on one of these videos to hear some changes done on the whole mix. So what I've done here is I've loaded up a stock EQ. It's called a channel EQ built into Logic. It doesn't matter which EQ that you have in front of you. They're all going to operate somewhat similarly. In this case, we've got 2 high and low shelves here, low shelf, high shelf, and 4 parametric EQs to go up the middle. And then we've got a low cut and a high cut filter, or if you want to get technical, a high pass and a low pass filter. Depends on who wrote the manual. So anyway, when it comes right down to it, EQs can be very, very tricky because you might not understand the scale of what you're changing when you're moving these EQ points around. For example, I see a lot of people doing EQ moves like this, where if you zoom in really up close, you can see that this line change is almost 15 dB different. So you're making a 15 dB boost there. And just so you understand, 6 decibels, every increment of 6 decibels equals a double in amplitude. Or if you're going down 6 dB, that's half the amplitude of whatever frequencies happen to be involved in that EQ. Or if I do 6 dB boost overall, that's double. And if I do 6 dB down, that's half the amount of volume. So 6 dB is a pretty magical number to keep in mind when you're doing EQ. And one of the things that I don't like about a lot of these EQs is that they're not very clear. Like, what line does this equal? It equals 5 dB of a change. Well, that means that most people who are EQing who've never taken a class or don't really understand the whole concept of EQ are doing some drastic changes like this. 20 dB is not uncommon for a lot of people. And I'm not saying that's wrong in any way, but it's just very easily fooling your ears. So I just want to show you on the full mix. Let me show you what that kind of an EQ change sounds like. That's pretty drastic, right? I mean, those changes are very, very obvious. So one of the things I do like about this stock plugin in Logic is that it allows you, if you go over here and you grab on this, you can actually push the scale into a more natural logarithmic scale, which is closer to the way we hear changes anyway. So this is a really good way to work. And it makes that 5 dB line be about where the 15 dB line was before. So you can hear, so now just changing the way that this is viewed, listen to that. There's still a bit of a change, but it's nowhere near as drastic because I'm not doing so much EQ. And, you know, some of the things that we like as human beings is a lot of high frequency content, like boosting up these highs can sound shiny. And who doesn't love some bass? So once you've got your EQ set to a way that more approximates the way our ear hears by knowing what your lines are doing, in the case of the Logic one, moving those so that you can see more of, you know, 6 dB increments is really what I want to try to get across to people. Once you have that done, it's going to be more subtle on the screen. Like you'll be making some adjustments like you had been in the past, but before that would have been like up to here, 15 dB plus. Now with this expanded, you're only going to be doing like 5-6 dB of change. And that's actually probably going to get you some better results, because usually doing more than 6 decibels of any kind of EQing anywhere is changing something in a drastic way. I'm not saying that's wrong at all, because again, you know, as long as you end up with something that you're happy about, it doesn't matter what you did to get there, right? But when it comes to EQ, a little bit goes a long way if you have something that you're trying to create a natural sound. I mean, if you're starting out with digital samples and you're EQing it, I mean, the world is your oyster, because you can just create something completely unnatural, undone in the world. But when you're working with microphones and real instruments and human vocals, and you're trying to keep them sounding somewhat realistic, doing, you know, small adjustments here and there, like 3 to 6 dB of changes when you need them, can make a huge difference in the overall sonic character of that instrument or vocal. I would love to talk about EQing in depth, but with these short videos, we can only go so far. So really quickly, I just want to explain that soloing a single instrument or a single microphone, whether it be a vocal, a snare drum, whatever it is, when you solo something and you EQ that while it's soloed, and then you bring it back out into the full mix, you might end up with something that doesn't quite work for the mix, even though it sounded great while it was soloed. It's really easy to fool your ears while you're just listening to one thing as an element, when really what matters is how it fills out the whole mix. How things fit together in the mix is really what you're doing when you're mixing. So sometimes you can get good at EQing by soloing things out, but a lot of times once I'm making some significant choices with EQ, I tend to do it while the whole mix is playing on whatever instrument I happen to be EQing, just to see how what my choice is there is impacting the full flavor of that dish. So let's do some examples of this here. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the guitars, the bass, and then the vocals. I mean, the drums, as we've got them, they're pretty, you know, they sound great. Really nice big room sound. Not much that I really want to change overall with the tonality of that right now. But if we were to go in and just focus on the bass, for example. And in this recording setup, we had a DI straight out of the instrument and a mic on the cabinet that they were using. And you can hear some of the room in the cabinet, which really doesn't matter. That level of bleed is not that big of a deal. But yeah, I like the sound of the cabinet in this, so I'm just going to work on the cabinet right now. So there's a lot of different really great EQs out there, but I have a particular love for FabFilter's Pro Q3 series. It's a fantastic plugin, and it's got a really good FFT graph that shows you real-time playback of what frequencies are involved. And this is a really nice sounding bass, actually. Like, there's not a whole lot that I would change about it by itself because it's sounding pretty full and rich. One of the things I think is going to impact the guitars is this range right here. So just to show you in solo mode, this will allow me to show you what frequencies this EQ curve is affecting. So if I press that, it lets you just focus on the frequencies that you want to EQ. And the range that's feeling like it's going to be an issue for the guitars is right around here, around 200 Hertz. So I'm going to cut, and just to show you up close, I'm only cutting a little more than 3 dB out of that section, but I can pretty much be guaranteed that with the guitars, if we turn off the EQ for one, you can hear how in that lower range of the guitars, like if we were to just focus on the guitars for a second, let's focus on this guitar because it has a little bit more of the. Let me actually just copy that same EQ over so we can just see what I'm doing there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to boost the same frequencies in this one, just so I can show you what's happening there. So here's that range of frequencies that I'm cutting out of the bass. And this is the space, if we just solo this out in the guitar, there's some muddy stuff happening there by itself, but really if we were to remove that out of this guitar, it would rob the guitar of a lot of presence and vibe. I mean, see how weak that sounds all of a sudden? So what I'm doing here is I'm going in and I'm going to make some room for that special place in that guitar tone by cutting a little bit out of the bass right there. And I'm hoping that this comes across on YouTube, but it sounds a lot clearer when this EQ is in, and I'm only doing a 3 dB change, so it's not major, but let me turn it off. And those two things are going to fit together a lot clearer because of the whole concept of masking. And that's such a deep subject. I don't even want to go into it right now. You should just go do some research on masking. I'm sure you'll come up with thousands of videos. So.